Hello and welcome. Now you might be somebody who's either looking for a job by necessity or just out of curiosity, and this video is exactly about that. However, the format that I picked for today's video is slightly different. So we're going to be playing a game. The rules of the game are quite simple. You will have a choice to go through a door. To enter each room, you will have to face challenges and requirements. Additionally, there will be a modifier for each challenge. And last but not least, once you enter, we'll have a look what kind of deal you got yourself into. So let's begin. As you start the game, you're faced with two sets of options, option A and option B. You slowly approach option A. This seems to be the regular employment route, and as you look around, you find your first artifact, which is barrier to entry. As you flip around this book, this seems to be a guide of requirements for the system. Now, the system, of course, refers to the employment system, which naturally or unnaturally grew into the thing that we have right now. Looks like some of the requirements require you to have the ability to write a good CV. The other one is to be able to effectively apply for jobs, which is a skill set on its own, because you'll need to be able to not lose hope, live through a number of job ads and find the ones that are real. Next, you have spotting a good manager. And I cannot stress enough how important of a skill set this will be in the beginning of your career and also somewhere in the middle of your career. Now, of course, towards the end of your career, assuming that you level up to as much as possible and then you're no longer rely on your manager, but your manager is going to be essential to your growth and your ability to learn within the company, not to mention the effect on the mental health that you will have from this person. Some other things that are here, and I listed degree is optional on purpose. Now, the degree is optional mostly for the reason being that I met so many people right now that never got a degree, and they managed to build a good enough career for themselves, specifically. In a lot of the cases, it was either in cybersecurity or software engineering as such in general, but it is possible to do that with a degree. However, a degree plays a different modifier that we'll get to later. Some other things that are here and are listed as very important are tradable skills, which means you're able to carry out skills that are useful for the company, where essentially they will hire you for those skills, and last but not least, experience, which again, I put in parentheses here because you can have real experience and you can have perceived experience. And perceived experience is mostly referring to you just being in a company, and that usually is already enough for somebody to see that, okay, this guy or girl knows exactly what they're doing. Now, assuming that you have the requirements needed for this door, you are faced with your first task. You need to find a key to unlock this door. Now, your first challenge will be to withstand the undefined interview process. And the word undefined here plays a key role because it will largely depend on individual companies what kind of rules they will set in for selection process. So some will have very clear rules, some will have very undefined. And essentially, when you're the applicant and you're trying to get into somewhere, you are in a significant disadvantage because you're not the one setting the rules, which means that you need to play by the rules set by somebody else. Now let's roll your first modifier. Looks like you rolled a 1. Too bad. You'll be facing fake job ads, which means that some of the applications that you will apply for will be entirely fake, either done for information farming purposes or by companies who are not actually hiring but just want to be pretending that they're hiring. Additionally, you will be faced with fake applicants, which means that there's a number of people that are applying for the same role that are not real. And what happens as a side effect, the pile of CVs that now you're being selected from is artificially increased. Additionally, if it's not fully sorted by automation already now, the person that is sorting those CVs and looking at it is usually in a worse mood because they need to sort through fake people, and they will judge you much harsher, in these situations, because now, they had to sort all these fake people. Last but not least, you have completely unbalanced supply and demand. So you might have noticed the number of layoffs that is happening in different sectors, industries, and, myself, I worked in tech for 12 years. So it's a very heavily disrupted field right now. And what is happening is that these simultaneous layoffs create this supply and demand unbalances or disbalances, in other words. And this disbalance is a cause for people with a similar skill set to apply for the same jobs, mostly because they were let go at the same time, which essentially makes it a lot worse to look for other jobs. Not to mention, if it's your first job, you're faced with a number of graduates that are coming out, and this makes things a little more complicated. Now, your second challenge is, of course, to get the second part of the key, which is an undefined process for an interview. You roll your modifier again, and you roll a 4 this time. And it looks like the interview process that you'll be facing will have restructuring mid-interview process, which is, in long story short, referring to companies going through restructurings while simultaneously going for interviews. So there's this misalignment that happens internally, sometimes gets discontinued, gets cut, budget cuts, team cuts, all of those things that are happening at the same time. Additionally, you'll be facing with ghosting recruiters, which means that sometimes even when you did get selected for an interview and your mid-interview process, sometimes you still get ghosted by recruiters, and just unfortunately another thing that happens quite often. Not to mention that the round of interviews that you'll be faced with is also so bizarre. I've been to interviews which had 8 rounds, and I still didn't get the job in the end. But that's life. It's somebody else setting the rules, and that's how it goes. And last but not least, there's 2 more things that are very important to mention, is the number of internal hires. So in a lot of the countries, there is a rule that you need to advertise the role externally before you can hire somebody internally, which means that you're just downright just wasting people's time by interviewing them to a job that they will not get anymore. And of course, my personal favorite is takesies backsies offers. And this is just such a stupid thing. Like, honestly, so, what happens is that sometimes even when you get an offer, the company goes back and says, things change, the offer is no longer valid. And they can do that because they are setting the rules when you're applying. However, for you, no challenge or modifier is scary, and you go through these challenges and you open this door. And congratulations, you get your first artifact. Now you're eligible to trade your time for money. You can have a look at the deal as you got yourself into. So from now onwards, you are able to trade your time by carrying out tasks, playing a role, playing by company rules and structure. And this is a very important part because essentially structure also implies that you have priorities that you will follow. You will follow the hours that the company will set. You will follow the rules that they set, how you're going to be judged, how you're going to be evaluated, and things like that. However, in return, you will receive a paycheck, which is usually the main thing that people are getting jobs for. I don't know why it's always such a weird question. Why do you want this job? Anyways, looks like for the traded time, you will be receiving a paycheck, some benefits if you're lucky, some perceived safety. And I say perceived safety because the market is quite unstable right now. So there's a lot of uncertainties that are going around. And last but not least, you will have a chance to develop skills in the process. Hopefully these skills are in high demand later, because that largely will depend how your future career will look like. Looks like you have a chance to start over. If you would like to hit that like button right now, if you're enjoying the video so far, that would be very appreciated. And let's go back to the drawing board, and you have the same set of options. Now let's approach door option B. Now, door B looks like to be the entrepreneurship route, and additionally you notice that there is no lock. However, as you approach the door, a giant goblin appears, and this is your new challenge. Looks like you'll need to overcome your fear and also be okay with all the financial risk if you go through this door. The requirements for this challenge is, number 1, that you'll need to learn how to set up a company, do company taxes. Both of these skills are very easily solvable when you hire people. So essentially you can hire a company to do it for you. And that solves a lot of the problems, but it really depends on your budget if you're able to do it. Additionally, you'll need to build a product or service, which usually people are very excited about because of course you want to provide something that you're passionate about and you want to solve a problem and get paid in the process. And last but not least, of course, you'll need to find clients. And now this, opens a new set of skills that you'll need to acquire to find new clients. Now, the other set of requirements that I have here is that you are required to have at least one of the money-making skills. Now, money-making skills mostly refer to having the ability to either sell something or make something or design something, and last but not least, trade and essentially buy something for less and sell it for more. And ideally you have more than one skill. If you have all 4, you're usually quite set to be a high performing entrepreneur. But now let's have a look how your modifier is looking. Unfortunately, you roll another 1, and you'll be facing a lot of self-doubt and fear, which is completely normal for a lot of people, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Additionally, you have maybe some judgment that you need to deal with and a limited budget. I've listed the limited budget here as this is an extremely common constraint that people have, including myself. Basically, when you're considering starting your own company, you need to take into account, can I take this risk financially? Last but not least, I listed responsibilities here, and responsibilities with the red R is also a very important modifier because everybody's life is different. So you have a different set of opportunities, but additionally you have a different set of responsibilities that you'll be faced with, which means that maybe you have a family to take care of, maybe you have sick parents, or any other thing that will be potentially giving you additional risk that you cannot take right now. Of course, for you, none of these challenges is too scary and you get the requirements you need to defeat the ogre. Congratulations, you get a new set of artifacts. Number one is now you have your entrepreneurship lock, which means that you can lock the door behind you, and now you will be the one who's deciding if somebody else wants to join your company, who you're going to hire, how you're going to do it, and how do you want to grow your team and build a better product or service. Number two is also the scroll of responsibility. Now it looks like this comes with a twist to it because the full responsibility is now yours. The unlimited amount of success that you can have is in your control. So when things go right, unfortunately, when things do go wrong, and sometimes they do, this also fully falls on you right now. Now, if we have a look at what type of trade deal you got yourself into, you have uncertainty and risk, which we already discussed, and full responsibility for the product or service that you're providing. However, in return, now you're getting profit. You can decide what part of the profits will you need to take as salary. You are also going to have equity of the company, which essentially means that you have long-term ownership, which potentially can grow in the future. And last but not least, you have full autonomy, which means that you decide how you run things, how you provide services, how you provide products, and this is fully in your control how you run the show. Now, it's important to mention that sometimes, of course, regular employment will also have the option to have some equity of the company. It can come in a form of shares, it can come in the form of options, which gives you a particular price that you can buy the company shares at, and of course, you also have warrants, which is a very similar financial product. And look at that, there's another opportunity to start over. Let's have a look what happens then. Looks like the wall is just cracked and another door appears. Seems to be an option in between A and B, maybe something between entrepreneurship and regular employment. As you approach this door, there seems to be option C, and option C is everything about freelance. The door seems to be not locked, however, there's another entity guarding it. It looks like another set of financial risk and fear that you'll need to face in order to go through this door. Now, to face this challenge, you have a similar set of requirements. You are required to register a company and do taxes, and if I mentioned before that you can, of course, hire people to do it, and there's also a learning curve if you want to learn it yourself, so that's completely a normal option to do, and people do it and succeed to do it. Additionally, here you need to build a portfolio, and portfolio is slightly different from having a CV because portfolio should represent your work, ideally with references, where some other clients can say how good of a work you've done in whatever product or service that you were providing before. Additionally, you will be faced with searching for clients, which means that it's no longer an option that is continuously going the same route. You will need to search new clients in going into these different freelance contracts. Now let's roll for your modifier. And at this point, you're no longer surprised that there's complicating factors that affect your decision making. So it looks like for freelance option, you'll be facing with lack of client references, maybe because you're just starting. You have inconsistent income to take into account because contracts sometimes spike in demand and sometimes there's completely dry periods of time where there's no clients coming in. Additionally, it looks like you might be first at the layoff line. What this means is essentially when companies are doing these layoffs, they first legally can easier let go contractors and freelancers because the contract usually implies a lot shorter period for letting people go, which means that there's less risk if they decide to cut you. Of course, like your skill set will differ, which situation will be different, but that's the things that I saw where I worked at. Last but not least, clients that refuse to pay. Now, this is a huge pain in the ass, like there's no other way to describe it, because when I had my first company and, well, I was very inexperienced and this was just the beginning of my career, but essentially I had a situation when I finished the job, I sent it over to the client because we had, good relationship, and after sending the payment, they completely ghosted me and stopped replying. So this does happen, and there's a learning curve, and additionally you learn who we can trust, but this is something that you need to take into account when you're just starting out. However, no challenge, no modifiers carry for you, and you go through this ghost, you get the requirements done, and now you get your new artifact. So congratulations, now you can control your work hours. Now, if we have a closer look, what kind of deal lies behind this door? Essentially, you accept to play a role in the client's either company, or it could be also a consumer-based client, but you accept a certain structure. You're not employed by them, which means that there's no quarterly reviews, there's no salary changes. You just have a business deal where you agree on a rate, and in your case, I hope for a higher rate than in regular employment because you're taking much more risk, and as you carry out tasks and responsibilities or provide a service or product. Now, in return, you receive profit. And I say profit here again, not a paycheck, because you are in control how much money will you be taking on payroll. Usually people don't want to take the full amount because there are tax implications if you immediately take it. Additionally, depending on which country you live in or which state you live in, you might be able to take some of the profits in dividend form. Additionally, you receive the full ability to control your scheduling, your work hours, and what kind of clients that you're going to deal with. Now, this can be also a good thing and a bad thing. A bad thing is if you don't like your clients, but you still decided to work with them because maybe there's no choice. But in most cases, what this allows is that people can set their work hours, maybe work remote more often, and just have more control this way by choosing the freelance option. Oh, look at that. There's another option to restart. Let's see what happens when you hit that. Lucky you, looks like you found the staff of change, and now you're eligible for improvements. Now, the requirements to use the staff are quite simple. You will need to develop your network and develop your skills further. Now, networking in particular is the ultimate card that you can play regardless which door that you're going through. Because despite the fact that we as humans work better when we collaborate with other people, this also helps you to get interviews easier, maybe get a referral, or getting a good insight. What's the company like? What's it like working for them? It might help you find better contracts for your entrepreneurship setup. It might help you to get freelance contacts. All of those things get unlocked when you have a good network. Building a good network is not easy. And also, I think networking in general has quite a bad rep because some people do it purely for the benefits, and there's this authenticity and honesty that disappears along the way. But if we have a look, how do you develop network? You can do warm outreach, which means that if you're looking for something else, you reach out to people that you already know to say that you're looking for something, and then maybe they can help out regardless if it's a job, if it's a freelance contract. Maybe you want to start a company and you want to ask somebody to say, how do you do that, or how did they do that? How did it go for them? What are the first challenges that they faced? Additionally, you have an option to do event outreach, and by event outreach, I mean you enroll yourself into events, either digital or non-digital. If you can come in person, I think it's even better, and you meet other companies that are hiring. So what this means is that essentially you get a chance to show your face and have a direct connection with the recruiter, with the hiring managers, and also find out for yourself, is that place even interesting for you? Would you like to work with them in an option where you're a freelancer? Would you like to work with them in an option when you're a regular employee? These things help because when you hit that pile of CVs, ideally that person still remembers you, and ideally you manage to connect with them over a platform. Now, the cold outreach is something that is a bit more scary, for people like are slightly more introverted like myself, but what I'm referring to is reach out to employers, recruiters, hiring managers, either before applying or after applying, and just briefly introduce yourself to get a bigger chance to get selected from the huge pile of CVs that are going to pile up on somebody's desk and put you somewhere aside, put you in another pile that is going to get at least viewed by a human. Now, when it comes to developing your skill set, there's a few things to take into account. You can, of course, look at this particular role that you want to work with. And this means keeping up to date to new ways of working, keeping up to date with new certificates that you need to have. Maybe the company will have a budget for you that you can use to upskill yourself. If you can, sometimes it is worth to invest in yourself to develop a better skill set that you can later trade for money. Other things are industry-based skill set, which means that you are able to keep up with industry changes, understand what competition is doing, and kind of try to foresee what type of things are going to be happening in this company that you're working for, in this company that you're working with. Or if you're working on your own business, it becomes extremely relevant because now you need to keep up with these changes that are happening so you can stay still relevant. Another one that you cannot ignore is all the new technologies that are coming out, which means that in order to stay relevant, you need to keep up with the new technologies. You will always be faced with this requirement to be constantly up to date on these newest things that are coming out. Now, last but not least, and again, this is for somebody who's, of course, interested in this, but money-making skills, ability to sell, create, design, or trade something is very important, because if you want to later start your own company or go to freelance, instead of regular employment, it becomes very relevant very quickly. And now suddenly you're faced with this years of time that you could have built this skill, but you just chose not to do that. Now, you might be wondering, out of all the topics, why pick this one to be in a form of a game? And the reality is kind of sad, I think, in my opinion, because the market changed very rapidly for a lot of people, for the worse, not for the better. And it feels like there's all these new things that are coming out that are supposed to make things easier and better, but it has the opposite effect. And of course, I cannot speak for everybody, and for some, maybe it is a positive effect, but for me, it kind of felt like this application process is completely broken. A lot of the friends that I had been working with and enjoyed working with are gone and got laid off in like very short amount of time, which kind of was heartbreaking. And not to mention all the things that it feels very unfair. And there's all these AI changes that are happening, which in itself is not bad. It's not bad that there's new technology coming out. What is bad is that somebody jumps the gun and makes the conclusion on your behalf. It makes the conclusion for you, how your team is going to look like, how the people that you're working with are going to work now, because there's all these cost-saving opportunities that are happening. But of course, everything's business. It's a business transaction, and that's how things work. This was another video of Midjourney. I hope you enjoyed the game. Let me know which door are you at right now or about to change to. I'm very curious to hear your stories, how your choice happened, because it is very special. It is very special when real people are able to share their real experience and actually, inform others how it went for them, and inform others what they learned in the process. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.